So AOC versus Pelosi drama. So break it down for me. What is the dramas? From what my understanding of it is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is kind of the leader of this new wave of Democrats versus the old establishment guard. And AOC stated something like, because Pelosi doesn't agree with their unique policy perspective, that Pelosi's inherently some sort of racist.
Well, let's backtrack a little bit first of all. So the situation right now is that the House has already passed, Trump's immigration plan, and that has angered a lot of the progressive base of the Democratic Party, specifically the squad, quote unquote, of the freshman Democrats, such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Talisha Rahib, etc. So these quote unquote squad members of the Democratic Party, the more progressive base, are obviously very angered at what's happened because Nancy Pelosi basically gave Trump exactly what he wanted without no strings attached. And afterwards, Nancy Pelosi sent a quote unquote, very strongly worded letter to Trump. But, Nancy Pelosi has been described as, the master legislator. You don't give away all your all the things that you were negotiating over to the other side and then ask to negotiate after you've, conceded everything. That's not how negotiation works. And, this was a failure for, Nancy Pelosi. Now, fast forward after that vote was taken, Nancy Pelosi goes and does an interview with the New York Times. And during that interview, she quote unquote says, and this in reference to AOC and, the squad I would mention earlier, all these people have their public whatever and their Twitter world, Miss Pelosi told Miss Dow in an interview with the New York Times over the weekend, but they don't have any following. They're 4 people, and that's how many votes they got. So in this quote, obviously, Nancy Pelosi is taking a very starch, jab at AOC and those progressive wings. And she's basically remarking and telling them, look, we don't appreciate your communication styles of you vetting out on Twitter and attacking our own party internally. If you have a problem, bring it up with me privately and don't be starting drama like for the journalists to use against us and divide us. But AOC obviously responds saying on Twitter, that public whatever is called public sentiment. She wrote on a post getting 4.7 million followers and messages that recirculated more than 100,000 times. So she's essentially saying, look, you messed up. Now I'm going to my Twitter family and I'm telling them how I feel. I'm being transparent. But again, it's that idea between Nancy Pelosi and AOC that we shouldn't be dividing us, but we should be working together to defeat a common enemy, in this case, Donald Trump.
So talk about Alexandria Ocasio's comments that Nancy Pelosi is targeting women of color.
So yeah, following the next day, I'm sorry, it wasn't the next day, it was probably a few days later, after Nancy Pelosi made those comments, she also responded saying that she singling out the freshman members of Congress and saying that she was specifically attacking women of color, which I personally disagree with. I think that she's just attacking them solely because, their political beliefs being on the more leftist scale of the Democratic wing.
Or not in alignment with the goals of the Democratic Party at the moment.
The establishment,
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I don't think Nancy Pelosi disagrees with the policy endgame that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants. I think policy-wise, Nancy Pelosi and AOC are on the same page. However, the means to get there and the speed at which we need to get there is obviously not something AOC wants, and she wants to accelerate that. Not only does she want to accelerate the policy goals that they both share, but they want it in a way where it just happens right now and it happens at all. For example, there's no trade-offs. We don't give Trump his wall. We don't give Trump any oxygen, and we just allow for our policies to pass. And that's just not how politics works. I think AOC's miscalculation here is that,
she shouldn't have gone for the race card, and that's
she shouldn't have gone for the race card.
And people are calling out for that. Representative LAKEY from Missouri, literally said, this is the race card, and it's a weak argument, and you shouldn't be doing this. But to be fair to AOC, I do think it's kind of hypocritical what Nancy Pelosi is doing because she's telling AOC to bring up things privately and internally and we can discuss behind closed doors. But then she's calling out AOC in front of the New York Times in an interview she's doing with them. So what kind of message are you signaling here?
Well, at the end of the day, there's no way to kind of predict what AOC will do because she's willing to sabotage negotiations within her own party. And it's funny. I think what Antifa when people criticize Antifa, they say that, oh, even members who criticize Antifa are kind of told not to talk shit about it on public. And it's like, where did Antifa learn that from? Or are the Democrats learning it from Antifa? Because it's like, why aren't you allowed to criticize your own party? That's like the cornerstone of this entire Democratic primary, is like the failure of our inability to get the average voter, because we have kind of pandered ourselves to the elites. When Cory Booker and all these people talk about stuff like that, like, we have pandered ourselves to elites, we need to talk about working class people. That is a direct criticism of the 8 years of the Obama administration, which, again, they have a right to say that they have failed to capture the kind of blue collar worker that needs to be brought back into the party. So that's a form of criticism. So how come AOC isn't allowed to criticize the Democratic platform? And I think Pelosi is kind of out of line saying that, oh, she shouldn't be putting these negotiations out there. Well, if you just say that she has only 4 votes, and it's enough for you to go on the New York Times and say that her couple million plus following is just whatever, if you just need to mention that to begin with, it's something that you are concerned about. You don't talk about things you're not concerned about. Like, it's just dumb. It's just dumb politics by Pelosi and AOC. I think as much as Pelosi will try and sit down AOC, she realizes that AOC has an agenda, Pelosi has an agenda, and they just do not meet on how to get the policy proposals passed. And this is where this war of attrition is going on, the media war, the internal infighting publicized, and so on and so forth.
But also going into like this whole debacle between the establishment and progressive wing of the Democratic Party, it's not just limited to this. There have been other examples that are part of like a greater issue. For example, the DNC recently wanted to make contractors that collaborate with the DNC sign a pledge saying that you will not provide any services to individuals and primaries that are challenging current incumbents. Basically saying that people like AOC should have been barred from receiving, people that have done work with other individuals in the DNC because they were challenging an incumbent in her race and in her primary in that case.
Wait. Can you say that more clearly, Lamar?
Sure, of course. So the DNC was pushing a pledge to be signed by contractors that provide services to the DNC. And this pledge basically said...
So DNC made... So contractors they work with had to sign this pledge written by the DNC that if you work with us, you cannot work with people who are taking out our incumbents. So say, for example, like...
In a primary race.
In a primary race, yeah. Because that's just...
And the whole point of democracy is that you are willing to have like foster ideas and have people like, challenge you. Like there's nothing democratic about that,
Okay. We can talk about the merits of that policy being bad or good, but bringing up this tired old tradition of democracy this and democracy that, like, that's great, and we should always strive to be the party of democracy and whatnot. The Democrats should, but at the end of the day, like, that's not how elections are won. That's not how political oppo research is done. It's obviously using contractors, organizations, companies that have worked on both sides of the playing field. I mean, many Republican campaign managers and campaign staffers have worked for Democrats as well for that exact reason, because Democratic primary contenders see that as a value of knowing thy enemy. So
yeah, you're right. So it's kind of weird because, again, like, these aren't necessarily partisan individuals. Like, their IT companies provide like the data on like how much contributions one donated or something like that. So it's nothing like that's specific strategy to a specific party. It's just basic IT and technology information.
Yeah.